The Battle of Exegol marked a pivotal moment in the galaxy's history. But imagine for a moment if the outcome had been different. If the combined forces of the Resistance and the galaxy's ragtag defenders had faltered, and the final order, under the iron will of Darth Sidious, had triumphed. What would the galaxy look like under the shadow of his new empire? Darth Sidious had spent decades weaving his web of deceit, manipulating events from the shadows, and even cheating death itself. His vision for the galaxy went far beyond what the Galactic Empire had achieved. The victory at Exegol would cement his dominion, an eternal reign backed by his fleet of planet-destroying star destroyers. The galaxy would not just see a return to imperial rule, but an evolution of tyranny, one that fused military might with dark side mastery on an unprecedented scale. Under this new regime, Sidious would establish himself as the ultimate authority, both politically and spiritually. His return would be heralded as divine by the Sith eternal cultists who had long awaited their master's resurrection. With their fanatical devotion, Sidious would spread his influence through fear and mysticism. The galaxy would no longer simply fear military reprisals, it would cower before the very idea of rebellion, knowing that any defiance would invoke the wrath of a ruler with godlike power. Corusant, the former capital of the Galactic Empire and once a beacon of the Republic, would undergo a grim transformation. Sidious, never one to leave symbols of the old order intact, would likely reshape the planet into a grotesque monument of Sith domination. The towering skyscrapers would be refitted with crimson spires and Sith architecture, while the Jedi Temple, already desecrated during his previous rule, would become a temple dedicated to Sith teachings. The Senate would be dissolved entirely, replaced by a council of Sith loyalists and military leaders, ensuring that every corner of the galaxy felt the weight of Sidious's rule. The galaxy's culture, too, would be reprogrammed. Sith ideology would replace the Republic's long-standing values of democracy and freedom. History would be rewritten, with propaganda framing the Sith as the rightful rulers of the galaxy, destined to bring order and peace through strength. This narrative would be drilled into the minds of every citizen, from the outer rim to the core worlds. Children would grow up in academies designed not to foster creativity or critical thinking, but to create obedient servants of the state. The military would undergo a massive reorganization. The fleet at Exegol, with its planet-killing capabilities, would be the cornerstone of Sidious's new military doctrine. Each star destroyer would serve as both a weapon of mass destruction and a mobile command center, capable of subjugating entire systems with minimal resistance. These ships, crewed by loyalists indoctrinated from birth, would be the ultimate enforcers of Sidious's will. On the ground, stormtroopers would be replaced by an elite force of Sith troopers, soldiers trained not just in conventional warfare but in the dark side of the Force. These troopers would be more than just enforcers, they would be symbols of the Empire's invincibility. Their presence would serve as a constant reminder that the dark side was watching, ready to crush dissent with brutal efficiency. Sidious's mastery of the dark side would allow him to extend his control in ways never before seen. Through the Force, he could influence entire populations, bending their will and sowing fear and loyalty simultaneously. His resurrection, already a defiance of natural law, hinted at the potential for even greater dark side rituals. With the power of the Sith eternal and the resources of the galaxy at his disposal, Sidious could explore avenues of immortality that would ensure his rule lasted for millennia. The Force itself would suffer under this new empire. With Sidious as its master, the balance would be irreparably tilted toward the dark side. Light side users, hunted to near extinction during the previous empire, would find survival nearly impossible. The few that remained would be driven underground, their connection to the Force diminished by the overwhelming darkness. The galaxy's natural harmony would erode, replaced by chaos masquerading as order. Economically, the galaxy would see a shift as well. Resources would be directed not toward the well-being of its inhabitants, but toward sustaining Sidious's war machine and dark side experiments. Entire planets could be strip-mined, their populations enslaved to fuel the Empire's insatiable appetite for power. Wealth would be concentrated among those who served the Empire faithfully, creating a stark divide between the ruling elite and the oppressed masses. Resistance, if it survived at all, would be fragmented and desperate. The lessons of the past would not be lost on Sidious. He would take every precaution to ensure no alliance could rise to challenge him. Surveillance would be omnipresent, with entire sectors under constant watch. Any hint of rebellion would be crushed before it could take root, leaving the galaxy in a state of perpetual fear. Ultimately, this new empire would be a galaxy-wide manifestation of Sidious's dark vision, a place where individuality and freedom were sacrificed at the altar of order and power, where the Sith ruled unchallenged and the Force itself was bent to the will of the dark side. The victory of the Final Order would fundamentally reshape the galaxy in every conceivable way. With the Resistance obliterated and the last vestiges of rebellion extinguished, Darth Sidious would move quickly to consolidate his power and eliminate any remaining threats. His approach would be thorough and methodical, ensuring no chance of insurrection could arise. He would not merely conquer the galaxy but reshape its very fabric to reflect the Sith ideology. Sidious's rule would start with a brutal campaign of pacification. Systems that had shown loyalty to the Resistance or failed to support the First Order would face immediate and devastating repercussions. Entire planets might be subjected to annihilation by the fleet's planet-destroying star destroyers, serving as a stark warning to others. These acts of genocide would not be arbitrary but carefully calculated to instill terror. The galaxy would learn quickly that resistance, even in thought, was futile. With fear firmly established, Sidious would turn his attention to governance. Unlike the bureaucratic machinery of the old galactic empire, this new empire would rely heavily on the Sith Eternal's fanatical devotion and the absolute obedience of his military. Governance would be enforced through regional overseers, each a Sith acolyte or dark side practitioner. These overseers would wield unchecked power, ensuring that every sector adhered to the Emperor's decrees without question. They would also be tasked with rooting out any remaining traces of Jedi influence, no matter how small. Corusant would not only be the political heart of this new empire, but a dark spiritual center. Sidious would reshape the planet to reflect the Sith's dominance, converting its upper echelons into a massive temple complex where the dark side of the Force would be studied and harnessed. The Sith eternal cultists, who had long labored in secrecy on Exegol, would become the architects of this new spiritual order. Their teachings would permeate every aspect of society, turning loyalty to Sidious into a matter of religious devotion. Sidious's influence over the galaxy's culture would extend beyond simple propaganda. He would implement a sweeping re-education program designed to erase the legacy of the Jedi and the Republic. Schools would teach a rewritten history that glorified the Sith and portrayed the Jedi as traitors and warmongers who had brought the galaxy to ruin. Art, literature, and even music would be co-opted to serve the Empire, reinforcing the narrative that Sidious's rule was both inevitable and righteous. The Force-sensitive children across the galaxy would be identified at an early age and taken to Sith academies, where they would be indoctrinated into the dark side. These academies would produce a new generation of Sith, not as apprentices but as loyal enforcers and guardians of the Empire. They would serve as commanders, spies, and inquisitors, ensuring that the light side of the Force could never rise again. Sidious's empire would thrive on this constant infusion of dark side power, creating a self-sustaining cycle of oppression and fear. The industrial capabilities of the galaxy would be entirely repurposed to serve Sidious's war machine. Major industrial worlds like Corellia, Fondor, and Quat would be transformed into massive production hubs, churning out fleets of star destroyers, TIE fighters, and ground vehicles at an unprecedented rate. The Empire's focus would not be limited to maintaining order within its borders, but expanding its reach beyond the known galaxy. Sidious had long been aware of the unknown regions, and with his victory, he would see them as the next frontier for conquest. These expansions into the unknown regions would serve multiple purposes. First, they would provide an outlet for the Empire's insatiable need for resources. Second, they would act as a testing ground for Sidious's experiments in dark side alchemy and technology. With no restrictions, he could harness the raw potential of these uncharted territories to further his quest for ultimate power. The Empire would grow not just in size but in complexity, incorporating elements of the unknown regions into its structure. On a galactic scale, the balance of power would be shattered. The new empire would operate under a system of totalitarian control, with every aspect of life regulated by the state. Travel between systems would require authorization, and trade would be heavily monitored to prevent the flow of unauthorized goods and information. This level of control would stifle any chance of an underground movement forming, as every action would be scrutinized. technological innovation would be directed solely toward military and governmental applications. Civilian advancements would be rare and strictly controlled, ensuring that the populace remained dependent on the Empire for even the most basic needs. This dependence would solidify Sidious's grip on power, as the very survival of the galaxy's citizens would hinge on their compliance with his rule. Under Sidious's new order, individuality would be suppressed in favor of a collective identity centered around loyalty to the Empire. The concept of personal freedom, once championed by the Republic, would be eradicated. Every citizen would have a predetermined role, whether as a laborer, soldier, or bureaucrat, and any deviation from this role would be met with severe punishment. The galaxy would become a machine, with each part working in unison to serve the Emperor's will. The Sith doctrine would be enforced not just through military might, but through the pervasive use of fear and psychological manipulation. Sidious, with his unparalleled mastery of the dark side, would employ techniques to control and break the will of entire populations. Through the use of Sith rituals, he could project his presence across vast distances, influencing minds and ensuring absolute obedience even in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. In this dark future, hope would become a relic of the past. The galaxy, once vibrant and full of potential, would become a hollow shell of its former self, a place where creativity, compassion, and courage were extinguished under the suffocating weight of tyranny. Sidious's new empire would be a testament to the ultimate triumph of the dark side, a grim reality where the Sith ruled unchallenged and the galaxy lay in eternal submission. With the Final Order's dominance firmly established, Darth Sidious would have the freedom to delve even deeper into his most ambitious and sinister projects. The galaxy, subdued and reshaped into a reflection of his dark vision, would serve as both a resource and a laboratory for his unending quest for ultimate power. The Emperor's ambitions would not be confined to political and military control. They would extend into realms previously thought impossible, as he sought to harness the full potential of the dark side. Sidious's obsession with immortality would intensify. His resurrection through Sith alchemy and cloning was only the beginning. With the Sith eternal and the advanced resources of the galaxy at his command, he would refine the process, creating an unbreakable link between his physical form and the dark side of the Force. Experiments on a massive scale would become commonplace. Entire worlds might be sacrificed in his pursuit of eternal life and ultimate knowledge, their populations used as test subjects for dark rituals and genetic manipulation. The Sith's mastery over life and death would evolve, potentially leading to a dark and twisted form of immortality for his most loyal followers. These individuals, bound to Sidious through dark side rituals, could become more than mere servants. They might be transformed into undying enforcers, creatures of pure malice and power, who would ensure the Emperor's reign persisted for all time. These beings, immune to age and conventional forms of destruction, would represent the ultimate weapon of fear and control. Sidious's dominion would extend beyond the physical realm into the spiritual and metaphysical aspects of the galaxy. Through ancient Sith rituals, he could corrupt the very fabric of the Force. Planets strong in the light side, such as Ahch-To or Dagobah, would be targeted and transformed into dark side nexuses. These once sacred places would become focal points of Sith power, radiating darkness and further suppressing any remnants of the light side. The galaxy itself would groan under the weight of this darkness, its natural balance permanently skewed. As the Emperor's grip tightened, the Force-sensitive beings who had not yet been discovered or captured would find themselves in constant danger. The hunt for these individuals would be relentless. Sidious would not tolerate any potential threats to his supremacy, and even the faintest flicker of light side energy would draw his attention. Those captured would face a grim fate: forced indoctrination into the dark side or annihilation. This systematic purge would ensure that no Jedi or light side user could ever rise to challenge him again. The Imperial fleet, already a symbol of unparalleled military might, would continue to expand and evolve. Sidious would likely develop new classes of warships and weapons, each more devastating than the last. These ships would be equipped with experimental technologies born from Sith alchemy and dark science. They might possess the ability to manipulate gravity, disrupt communications across entire sectors, or even unleash dark side energy as a weapon. The fleet's purpose would be twofold: to enforce the Emperor's will and to serve as a constant reminder of his unassailable power. The societal structure of the new empire would solidify into a rigid hierarchy with Sidious at its apex. Below him would be a council of Sith lords, each ruling a specific region of the galaxy. These lords would be chosen not for their loyalty alone but for their ambition and power, as Sidious would want to foster competition and rivalry among them. This infighting would ensure that no single Sith could amass enough power to challenge his rule while simultaneously driving them to greater feats of conquest and control. The common populace, meanwhile, would exist in a state of perpetual servitude. Entire planetary populations would be reduced to a status akin to slavery, their lives dedicated to feeding the Empire's insatiable demand for resources and labor. Individual rights and freedoms, already a distant memory, would be completely eradicated. The Empire's propaganda machine would work tirelessly to instill a sense of inevitability and futility in the minds of the people, convincing them that resistance was not only hopeless but unnatural. For the galaxy's criminal underworld, the new empire would be both a curse and an opportunity. Sidious would undoubtedly exploit the existing syndicates, such as the Hutts or Crimson Dawn, using them to maintain order in the Outer Rim and other less manageable regions. In exchange for their loyalty and cooperation, these syndicates would be granted autonomy to operate within certain parameters. However, their existence would be tenuous, as Sidious would not hesitate to destroy them should they ever threaten his control. Economically, the Empire would enforce a command economy, dictating production and distribution on a galactic scale. Private enterprise would either be co-opted into the imperial structure or eliminated entirely. Wealth and resources would flow upward, enriching the Empire's elite while leaving the vast majority of citizens in poverty and dependence. This economic disparity would serve as yet another mechanism of control, as those struggling to survive would be less likely to resist. Sidious's long-term vision likely included the complete militarization of the galaxy. Every planet, no matter how insignificant, would contribute to the war effort. Civilian life would be indistinguishable from military service, with every aspect of daily existence geared towards supporting the Empire's expansion and defense. This total war economy would ensure that the Empire remained in a constant state of readiness, prepared to crush any internal dissent or external threats. In terms of exploration and expansion, Sidious would push beyond the boundaries of the known galaxy. The unknown regions, rich with untapped resources and mysteries, would become the Empire's new frontier. Sidious would see these regions not only as a source of material wealth, but as a realm of potential dark side discoveries. His fleets would chart new territories, subjugating or destroying any civilizations they encountered. The galaxy, under his rule, would truly become an empire without limits. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Sidious's reign would be its permanence. With his advancements in cloning and dark side immortality, he could theoretically rule forever. The cycle of Sith betrayal and succession that had defined the Order for millennia would be broken. There would be no new apprentices rising to overthrow their master, no hope for a brighter future. The galaxy would be locked in an eternal night, ruled by an emperor who had transcended mortality and become a godlike figure of absolute power. This is the horrifying reality of a galaxy where the final order triumphed. It would be a place devoid of hope, freedom, and individuality, where every living being existed solely to serve the dark vision of one man. Sidious would achieve his ultimate goal: total control, both physical and spiritual, over an empire that would endure for all eternity. In the aftermath of the Final Order's victory at Exegol, the galaxy would experience a descent into unparalleled darkness. Darth Sidious's new empire would stand as a monument to his insatiable lust for control and the total domination of the Force. His ultimate goal of eternal rule would no longer be a distant aspiration, but a cold, inescapable reality for the galaxy's trillions of inhabitants. This would mark the beginning of an era where the very essence of existence would be reshaped under the oppressive weight of Sith ideology. Sidious's empire would function as a machine of fear and oppression. Every institution, from local governance to galactic industry, would serve the singular purpose of sustaining his power. The state's surveillance apparatus would be omnipresent, using advanced technologies and the dark side of the Force to monitor and control every facet of life. Sidious's agents would ensure that even the smallest acts of rebellion were swiftly detected and mercilessly crushed. Trust among citizens would erode as neighbors, friends, and even family members would be coerced into informing on one another, creating a climate of pervasive paranoia. The dark side would become an omnipresent force in daily life, extending beyond the Sith Lords and their enforcers. Rituals and ceremonies glorifying the Sith would be mandatory, reinforcing Sidious's divine status. Citizens would be required to swear fealty to the Sith Order, pledging their lives to the Empire's cause. These acts would not merely be symbolic but would bind the galaxy's inhabitants in a collective submission to the dark side. In this new empire, the Sith were not just rulers, they were gods, and defiance was blasphemy. Education would be a crucial tool in Sidious's empire. From an early age, children would be indoctrinated into the Empire's ideology. They would learn a perverse history where the Jedi were the villains and the Sith were the galaxy's saviors. This systemic brainwashing would ensure that future generations grew up devoid of any connection to the values of the Old Republic. Creativity and critical thought would be suppressed, replaced by blind obedience and a willingness to serve. Those showing signs of Force sensitivity would be taken from their families and molded into agents of the dark side, whether as Sith acolytes or elite operatives. The military-industrial complex would be the backbone of the Empire. Every world, regardless of its previous affiliations, would be expected to contribute to the war effort. Massive shipyards would orbit major industrial planets, constantly producing the Empire's ever-growing fleet. Advanced weapons research would push the boundaries of technology, resulting in new and more horrifying instruments of war. The Empire's military doctrine would emphasize overwhelming firepower and psychological warfare, ensuring that any opposition would be defeated before it could pose a significant threat. Sidious would also harness the full potential of the dark side to manipulate and control the natural environment. Worlds that were previously lush and vibrant would be transformed into barren wastelands, their resources depleted to fuel the Empire's insatiable hunger. The Sith's dark influence would corrupt ecosystems, creating hostile environments where only the strong could survive. This transformation would serve as a metaphor for the Empire itself, a relentless force that consumed all in its path, leaving only desolation in its wake. The galaxy's spiritual landscape would undergo a dramatic shift as well. With the Jedi Order effectively eradicated, the Sith would face no significant opposition in their quest to dominate the Force. Sidious's mastery of the dark side would allow him to enact rituals on a galactic scale, corrupting the Force itself. This imbalance would have profound consequences, not just for Force users but for the galaxy as a whole. Natural phenomena would become unpredictable, with storms, earthquakes, and other disasters occurring with increasing frequency as the galaxy struggled under the weight of the dark side's influence. Sidious's empire would not be content with merely ruling the known galaxy. His ambitions would drive him to expand into the unknown regions and beyond, seeking new worlds to conquer and new sources of power to exploit. The Empire's fleets would become instruments of exploration and subjugation, bringing Sidious's rule to the farthest reaches of the cosmos. This expansionist policy would ensure that the Empire's dominion was truly limitless, spreading its influence to every corner of the galaxy and beyond. The few remaining pockets of resistance would face almost insurmountable challenges. With the destruction of the resistance at Exegol, the galaxy's hope for liberation would be all but extinguished. Isolated groups of rebels might continue to fight, but they would do so without the unity or resources necessary to mount a serious challenge. These groups would exist on the fringes, constantly hunted and forced to operate in secrecy. Over time, their numbers would dwindle, and their efforts would seem increasingly futile. Despite this bleak reality, the spark of hope could never be fully extinguished. Even under the shadow of Sidious's empire, there would always be individuals who refused to submit. These outliers, driven by a belief in freedom and justice, would carry on the legacy of the Jedi and the Resistance in their own small ways. Their defiance, however limited, would serve as a reminder that even the darkest tyranny could not completely snuff out the light. However, the true tragedy of Sidious's victory would be the galaxy's transformation into a prison of its own making. Under his rule, every aspect of life would be a tool of oppression, designed to crush individuality and enforce conformity. The galaxy's rich diversity of cultures and civilizations would be homogenized, their unique identities stripped away in favor of a single, oppressive ideology. Creativity, innovation, and free thought would wither, replaced by a monotonous existence where survival was the only goal. Sidious's new empire would not be a society but a machine cold, efficient, and utterly devoid of humanity. It would be a testament to the power of the dark side, a chilling reminder of what could happen when one man's lust for power went unchecked. This empire would not merely dominate the galaxy, it would suffocate it, ensuring that no spark of rebellion, no glimmer of hope, could ever rise again. And so, the galaxy would fall silent under the weight of eternal night, its people living out their lives in fear and submission, while Darth Sidious sat upon his throne, an immortal tyrant ruling over an empire without end.